What do you think when you listen to the word Battlefield? Cause I think in one of the best and most dense FPS franchise of all time. Battlefield started on 1942, released in 2002, being a class-based World War II shooter multiplayer like Day of Defeat. And yeah, I'm one of the unique guys in the entire world who remember that Day of Defeat exists. This game was released in a time where basically there was having a span of World War II FPS games after Medal of Honor from PS1, but instead make other games takes place in World War II. The second game, called Battlefield Vietnam, was obviously about the Vietnam War. After this was released Battlefield 2, Battlefield 2 Modern Combat, that was the first Battlefield game on the consoles being released for PS2 and Xbox 360, Battlefield 2142 being the first futuristic game of the franchise, Battlefield Heroes, that was basically a Fortnite before Fortnite exists, and in 2008 we got finally the GOAT, Battlefield Bad Company. This game still have the best campaign of the entire franchise, an incredible Apple arsenal, good and funny characters, and a solid multiplayer. Bad Company was the first game using the Frostbite 1.0, so the gameplay is just beautiful and have incredible scenario destruction. And okay, if you played Black from 2006, you won't be scared by this destruction, but Battlefield Bad Company was a much more beautiful game, much denser, with a much more open scenario than Black, and of course, Bad Company had multiplayer while Black didn't have. In 2009 was released Battlefield 1943, being an Xbox Live Arcade and almost a new version of 1942, so it was just a simple game to you play with your friends and have fun. This game was pretty good and was the first introducing the Frostbite 1.5, but despite introducing a new version of the ending, Battlefield 1943 didn't make as good use of it as it could have. So in 2010, Bad Company 2 was released. Now the Frostbite 1.5 showed its true potential. This game is scarily beautiful, and the textures and the illuminations are incredible even comparing to current games. The physics and the scenario destruction are better than ever. The sound design of the game improved a lot, and now you can hear shots and other sounds from far. The sounds of the weapons are impressive and realistic. Everything here is well done at minimum details. The campaign wasn't so good as the first game's campaign, but it's still incredible. The characters are the same. Now you have a great variety of scenarios. You even have a mission that takes place in World War II and using Battlefield 1943 weapons. And when we talk about the multiplayer, Bad Company 2 was extremely important to what Battlefield would become. You difficulty would find a game so beautiful, dense, realistic, and with a scenario destruction like Battlefield Bad Company 2. Even today, that scenario destruction is unique at a certain point. And of course, Bad Company 2 multiplayer wasn't perfect. In this game they prioritized rush mode a lot. Most of the maps were made for this mode, and they basically decreased the number of the players comparing with Battlefield 2, probably because of the rush mode, or maybe because Frostbite was so powerful that DICE was afraid that people's PC would explode with a large number of players. Bad Company 2 was incredible, but in the end it was just the beginning of something big, and this something, my boys, is called Battlefield 3. This game is literally the definition of Battlefield. If you know a guy who never played Battlefield before, the third game was a good entrance door. Everything that Battlefield represents to the gaming industry is here. This game is the definitive Battlefield. Now bringing the Frostbite 2 make the technical aspects even better. Battlefield 3 introduced for the first time the Battlefield Premium. Basically you pay to get the new DLCs in advance. Also, you become priority if you wanna join a server full of players. You can get some exclusive customized items like dog tags and other resources. And for example, Battlefield Bad Company 2 had the Vietnam DLC, and you need to buy it separately from the other DLCs. But in Battlefield 3, buying the premium make you every DLC in advance. Battlefield 3 had a campaign that was worse than Bad Company 2, but still awesome, and a co-op mode to you play with your friends. It was a complete game, and buying the premium and consequently get the DLCs is a good addition to the game. Battlefield was at its peak, a better game than the previous one, with the exception of the campaigns. With each new Battlefield, everything became more realistic, more dense, more immersive, more impressive, always bring new things, new elements, and it was just incredible, dude. The year was 2013, Battlefield 4 would be released, the trailer was simple incredible, and now the new game in the franchise would have the height of being released of the 80th gen of consoles, the PS4 and the Xbox One. And I know that the Wii U was from the 80th gen, but no one Battlefield was released for this console, and sincerely, with that hardware probably the Wii U would melt trying to run Battlefield 4. The franchise was in growing evolution, and everything was heading towards Battlefield 4 being one of the best FPS ever made, improving all the technical and gameplay aspects of Battlefield 3, bringing new things, more content. So what could go wrong? Well, everything went wrong. Battlefield 4 had a terrible campaign, worse than every Battlefield campaign released at that time. Even today this campaign have bugs, and when I tried to play this shit, I lost my fucking save. I was in one of the last missions, and when I woke up one day and turned on the Xbox to continue the campaign, my save was no longer there. It simple disappeared. But okay, it's not just the campaign that has bugs. The multiplayer was almost unplayable, extremely buggy, and having a terrible connection. You tried to shoot the enemy and the bullet didn't hit. You tried to play for a few minutes and the game crashed. Everything was problematic, nothing worked properly, textures were having problems, connection problems cause the servers were a fucking trash. Battlefield 4 brought a new thing called Levolution, basically a event during the matches that could modify the map almost for complete. Entire building could be destructed, entire structures could fall, and this was incredible. The game had the brand new Frostbite 3, so every technical aspect was improved, but no one of this could be used by players because of the huge amount of bugs and connection problems. The servers suffered a DDoS attack. EA and I say that the reason the game was completely broken was because of the game's grandeur, and in the end, the only thing left for fans was to play the old games and wait for DICE to fix Battlefield 4 and make it at least something playable. But in 2014, the game's spy launcher was shut down, and with that, all games in the franchise released before Bad Company 1 officially died. A few years earlier, Battlefield 2 Modern Combat already had its servers closed, so if you played on a PS3 or an Xbox 360, you could only start playing Battlefield through Bad Company 1, and since Bad Company 1 and 1943 didn't exist on PC, you could only start playing Battlefield through Bad Company 2. A piece of the franchise, I mean the entire beginning of the franchise, was officially lost, and still in 2014 was announced Battlefield Hardline. The game was released in 2015, and even today it's the weirdest Battlefield game ever made. Hardline wasn't about a war, it was basically a cops and robbers game with a mediocre campaign and a mediocre multiplayer. Nothing really justified the existence of Hardline. It was just a smaller Battlefield that could be a simple DLC for Battlefield 4. For many players, Hardline was a funny game, but it shouldn't have Battlefield in its name. It wasn't even made by DICE like the other games, it was made by Visceral. And talking about DICE, Battlefield 4 was fixed and improved, becoming basically one of the best Battlefield games of the entire franchise, an incredible immersive experience that you can play for hours and hours. If this video gets a lot of views, probably all Battlefield 4 players will be surprised or even angry with what I said about the game at release, and this is normal cause the game has improved so much that basically 99% of the player base that plays Battlefield 4 nowadays doesn't know that the game was released completely broken. I still wanna make a video about the redemption arc of Battlefield 4, but I'll only do it if you like this video and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a few seconds and it's free, please. In 2016 was released the first trailer of the next Battlefield, now abandoning the Modern Warfare and becoming a World War I game. Yeah, World War I and not World War II. And you can count on your fingers the number of AAA games that are set in World War I, so the next Battlefield would be something different. And because of the day that the game is set, the next Battlefield would be called Battlefield 1. A multiplayer bring everything good that Battlefield 4 already had. Incredible graphics, unbelievable scenario destruction, maps based on real scenarios, a completely immersive experience. You could literally get on a horse and go out with a melee weapon killing all the players. What could go wrong? Everything went wrong. Again, Battlefield 1 had a terrible progression that was slower than a fucking turtle with cramp. Battlefield 1 had something called random bullet alleviation, and the name is self-explanatory. Basically, when you shot with a weapon, it didn't go in a straight direction, it went in random directions, and this was even more bizarre in the SMGs of the medic class. The vehicles in Battlefield 1 were extremely OP, you would easily die to a tank, and destroying them was extremely difficult. This game was the most hacked Battlefield game of all time when it was released. It was bizarre, dude. Battlefield 1 was completely buggy, not necessarily like Battlefield 4, you could still play, but the bugs all through many were funny, others really broke your experience, and in the end are bugs. It wasn't supposed to be in the game, mainly a multiplayer one. But the worst part is that in Battlefield 1, players were beginning to encounter the new syndrome that would haunt all Battlefield games. The franchise was having a great evolution to 1942 to Battlefield 3, but from Battlefield 4, the franchise started to suffer from a syndrome where every Battlefield is released completely broken and over time DICE fix it. Battlefield 4 is an incredible game. Many players consider it the best Battlefield ever made, and the core of the game is really good, and the only problem it had at release was that it was almost unplayable, and when the game was fixed, everyone realized how good Battlefield 4 was. It was the first victim of this syndrome, and Battlefield 1 was the second. At the same time, EA had the brilliant idea of using Battlefield's Frostbite in other games from other franchises, but they forgot that Frostbite is a very difficult engine to work with. No one knew how to use it. DICE employees had to stop working on Battlefield to teach the devs from the other developers how to use Frostbite. This not only negatively impacted games like Need for Speed and Mass Effect Andromeda, as it also fragmented the number of DICE employees working on the next Battlefield. The chances of the next game in the franchise being bad were high, everything could go wrong, and for the third time it went wrong. In 2017, PlayerUnknown's Battleground popularized the Battle Royale, the genre that would be one of the biggest cancers of the gaming industry. But okay, PUBG, despite the problems, worked good, was fun to play, and had its own aesthetic. But in the same year, Fortnite was released, popularizing even more the Battle Royale concept and taking them to the mainstream, with many companies wanting to have their own Battle Royale to be very successful. And the next Battlefield would be a World War II game, and even with this fact, they still would ruin the game by putting out those things. The trailer was released and it was a disaster, a World War II game completely modified to please their retarded modern audience that use Twitter, has colored hair, is vegan, defends things like censorship and abortion, has 200 different pronouns and loves to show how he is an example of morality, but at the same time tries to cancel everyone who thinks differently, or for having offended the minority number 1971 that you didn't even know. Everyone complained mainly because of the presence of women with robotic arms in the middle of World War II. Battlefield 1 brought a lot of new people to the franchise, people who loved the experience of playing an immersive World War II FPS game. The game had already been fixed and improved, so it was possible to enjoy it and have many hours of fun, and the trailer for the new Battlefield only served to drive players away from the game. Those who liked a good old Battlefield game would continue playing Battlefield 4, and those who like an immersive war experience would continue playing Battlefield 1. But if you're a Twitter teenagers, congratulations, cause Battlefield 5 is for you. Obviously, Twitter teenagers and gaming journalists completely distorted the criticism made of the trailer and started saying that that Battlefield players were sexist and were only criticizing the game because it had woman in the trailer. And the things got worse when a developer said on Reddit, "I have a daughter and I don't wanna ever have to answer her question of why can I make a character that looks like me with because you're a girl. With all due respect, Mr. Dev, there really were women in World War II, but not in the way shown in the trailer, and there were very few. I would say that 90% of the people involved in World War II were men. Putting women in the middle of the battlefield with so much evidence and even putting a robotic army on them doesn't necessarily break the realism of the game, because Battlefield was never 100% realistic, but it breaks the immersion. No one is gonna play a World War II game to see this kind of madness, especially if it's a successor to Battlefield 1, which was extremely immersive game. If you don't wanna give this kind of answer to your daughter, you'll be hiding the reality from her. You'll be hiding something from our own history. And when she grows up, she will study about it in history classes and will know the truth, regardless of whether you had to change the story of World War II within your game for this. Many other developers cried on Twitter with much worse arguments, and to top it off, EA itself said that either you accept Battlefield 5 or you don't buy it. And when the game was released, the syndrome of the game being completely broken and being fixed over time has returned. Battlefield 5 was the third victim, and combining the broken release with the horrible marketing make Battlefield 5 sell much less than Battlefield 1 at the time. Battlefield 5 was fun to play because the formula of the game was similar to Battlefield 1 but having differences, but the multiplayer was far from good. Honestly, it's the most mediocre Battlefield game ever made, and in the end was really good to see their battle royale called Firestorm failing. Now was time to look to the future of the franchise. Literally to the future. Battlefield 2042 was announced and everyone was hyped. The return of the number 42, the return of the aesthetics of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, natural disasters, a surreal density, Battlefield is back. This is what fans and YouTubers said, and when the game was released, the syndrome of releasing the game completely broken and fixing it over time returned. Battlefield 2042 was the fourth victim, but this time it was the victim that suffered the most. Remember when I say that Fortnite brought the Battle Royale concept into the mainstream? Fortnite also popularized a formula, the formula with the game being always online, live service, with Battle Pass, skins, and seasons. All of these things, I mean, this formula became one of the biggest cancers of the gaming industry as the Battle Royale games. And one more time, many companies try to use this formula to make success. Battlefield 2042 is literally this type of shit. A live service game with skins, battle pass, seasons, and everything bad that modern multiplayer games have. If Battlefield 5 was made to please retarded Twitter teenagers, Battlefield 2042 was made to please retarded Fortnite teenagers who think live service is the coolest thing in the world. Battlefield had the premium, or as I said earlier, you paid and had access to all the DLCs in advance and got some exclusive things. It was something that wasn't that expensive and it was worth cause the content added in DLCs of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, for example, were pretty good and added a lot to the game. The idea of being a live service with a battle pass suggests that everything that was previously added through DLCs would be added for free through seasons, and you wouldn't need to pay premium to have things in advance. And if the normal game released with a lack of content, or even the season content is lazier or is delivered in a smaller quantity than the paid content, players won't complain cause the updates are free. When Battlefield 2042 was released, the game had just 3 modes. The first was called All Out War, warfare, having conquest, and breakthrough that was basically rush with gonorrhea, the game had just 7 maps on the release, and all of them were horrible. The second game mode was Hazard Zone, that was basically a battle royale because it's a modern game, so it needs a battle royale. And the third was the Battlefield Portal that bring maps, weapons, and modes from other Battlefield games like Battlefield 1942, Bad Company 2, and Battlefield 3. The game almost didn't have game modes. Battlefield has always impressed technically, but 2042 doesn't impress at all. The game is ugly, the destruction was horrible, there was almost no evolution. That tornado show in the trailer does practically nothing other than raise the players. It's ridiculous. 2042 is a Battlefield for people who don't like Battlefield. The class system that was something that existed since the beginning of the franchise was left aside in 2042. They gave preference to introduce a generic operator system. And of course, many bugs. The game was completely broken when it was released, and the game was obviously extremely massacred by players. Over time, seasons were released, maps were redesigned, the class system was added, more maps, more modes, the game was fixed and improved just like its predecessors. But the problem with Battlefield 5, and especially with Battlefield 2042, isn't necessarily the fact that they release broken. This syndrome is obviously a problem, but when the core of the game is good, it will be acclaimed by the community when it's fixed. Battlefield 4 was released broken, and when it was fixed, it was loved by players because the core of the game is good, and people just couldn't take advantage of the core because the game was completely broken. Battlefield 1 was released buggy and with many problems related to progression, balancing, and other things, and when almost everything was fixed, the game was loved by players. And why do few people like Battlefield 5 and 2042 even after the improvements? Because the core of these games is bad. Currently, Battlefield 2 Modern Combat and Bad Company 1 don't exist on PC, so they don't have a revival and no one can play the multiplayer of these games anymore. 1943 doesn't have an offline mode, became lost media. Battlefield 3 was recently closed on consoles and it's only possible to play multiplayer on PC. Battlefield is like a bee and apple. The left is the Battlefield games from 1942 to Battlefield 3. The right is the next Battlefield that we don't know much about, with the exception that it will be a Modern Warfare game headed by Vince Zampella from Medal of Honor Allied Assault, Titanfall, and Apex Legends. And the middle of the apple is Battlefield 4, 1, 5, and 2042 being the only games playable on any platform. EA's biggest FPS game franchise being treated like trash. Honestly, it's sad to see what Battlefield has become in the last decade.